Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to talk about Isaac Fawkes. Luis Rivera asked me to do a presentation on Isaac Fawkes. I'm delighted to do that. Isaac Fawkes was born in 1675. He crossed over May 25th, 1732. Jim Steinmeyer called him the most successful conjurer of the early 18th century. Now, I tend to know a little bit less about conjuring in the 18th century than I do in the 19th century. What you may or may not know about me, I'm a fan of the Victorian era. When Queen Victoria came to power, from that moment forward, I'm hooked. I love everything Victorian. And the golden age of magic really began at the tail end of her reign toward the end of the 19th century and continued up into the 1920s, 1930s. That's when you get Alexander Herman at the end of the 19th century. You get Thurston, you get Keller, you get Blackstone, you get Houdini. All of these characters moving the 20th century forward. So that's my period of greatest interest. But Isaac Fawkes is pretty significant, and I'll tell you why. Isaac Fawkes took magic. He started his performance career in the fairs, in the street, like all conjurers did at that time. But he moved magic to the mainstream. He made it palatable for the fashionable people of his society at that time. He elevated the art. Now, many people attribute Jean-Eugène Robert-Houdin as the one who did that. But 100 years before Robert-Houdin lived, Isaac Fawkes was doing exactly that. So I think that's the significance of Isaac Fawkes. In 1726, Isaac Fawkes created a slogan. I'm going to read the slogan for you. The dexterity of the hand is quicker than your eyes. You see, Isaac Fawkes, in the cultural context of his time, magicians were performing in street fairs and so on, and they were presenting magic often as real, as black magic, as conjuring. Isaac Fawkes came along and said, no, it's based on sleight of hand, and my sleight of hand is so good that you'll never catch it. So he practically dared his audience, very much the way Houdini did. He dared his audience to catch it. So that was cool. Now that slogan, the dexterity of the hand is quicker than your eyes, over time became the hand is quicker than the eye, which is an oft-quoted slogan in magic. He rose to fame in the 1720s, and he was virtually forgotten until Houdini came along and started doing the historical research and brought this man to the attention of the masses, or to those in magic at least, in 1904. He started working fairs. He was doing 6 shows a day. Folks, I've often said, if you want to be a great magician, you have to perform. And the Renaissance fairs, I mean, the guys that get the privilege of working Renaissance fairs, they're getting good at their craft. Penn and Teller started in the Renaissance circuit. The fairs of this time were very much like Renaissance fairs. This guy was doing 6 shows a day. I think that's amazing. But he didn't stay there. He transcended. And his act is something special. His act consisted of conjuring, contortionism by his son, which he called posture master, and the exhibition of mechanical devices that were manufactured by the famous clockmaker Christopher Pinchbeck. In other words, automata. Now, we very often associate Robert-Houdin with automata, but Isaac Fawkes was using it in his act long before Robert-Houdin did. One of the famous bits of business that Isaac Fawkes did, he didn't invent it, but he used it to great effect, was the egg bag. Even today, performers that feature the egg bag have a standard audience pleaser. Of course, Isaac Fawkes took it to a whole new level. He was producing eggs, he was producing chickens, he was making it a major production event in his show. He dressed in the fashionable attire of his time as opposed to dressing like a wizard, and he was among the first to successfully market magic to a different audience, to an upper crust or a high society audience, and he built his fortune on this. The man became wealthy for his time. He was a great and skillful self-promoter, which all magicians have to be if they're going to succeed. He knew how to work the press. He knew how to generate publicity. And he is described as a person who had a sense of the people. I love that, a sense of the people. As a performer, whatever kind of performer you are, you need to have a connection to your audience. You need to have a sense for what they're doing, for what their emotional state is while you're performing, and how to bring them along in the journey with you. Every great performer has a sense of the people, and so did Isaac Fawkes. He also featured, performers of this period and going straight up through the Golden Age put together variety shows. They didn't just do magic acts, they did variety shows. And I mentioned contortionism, which his son did. He also featured freak shows back in the 1700s, early 1800s, even late 1800s. These were very popular things. I want to read you this story because it just gets me, it really does. He featured a horned woman in his act. Her name was Elizabeth French. She apparently had a 10-inch growth coming out of her head. A 10-inch growth. And so he featured her in his act, and people would pay money to come in and see her. She remained in the employ of Isaac Fawkes for many years. Eventually, though, and this is where I want to read this, she eventually knocked the growth from her head when she fell down a flight of stairs. The horn was sold to Sir Hans Sloane. So, here she is making a living based on this growth that's coming out of her head. She takes a stumble down the stairs, the growth comes off, and they sell it. That's a kicker story, man. It really is. In 1731, Isaac Fawkes gave a show to the visiting Algerian ambassador and his party of dignitaries. And during that show, he demonstrated an effect called the blooming apple tree. What happened here is the apple tree blooms in front of the audience. Apples appear on the tree. He takes the apples off the tree, he distributes them, and the audience can eat them. Sounds a lot like the blooming orange tree of Robert-Houdin 100 years later. And Carl Dromain also did an effect with a rose bush very similar to this. So that effect's been around a while. I don't know if Isaac Fawkes invented it, but it's certainly not new. By the way, variations and versions of it are in Tarbell, if you're interested. Luis Rivera, thank you so very much for the suggestion. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please subscribe down below if you have not done so already. Please comment. I love your comments. Thank you so much. Have a great day.